Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, LinkedIn family. Welcome. My name is Rob Schenk. I am with Intelligent Technical Solutions. Quick housekeeping. We're going to be recording this, so this will be available at your leisure. Drop your questions in the chat at any time. We'll be tracking them. We'll be saving them for the back half of the session today. So for candor, this is not exactly the conversation that we had planned. 2 weeks ago, this was a session about getting ready for the upcoming November 10th CMMC assessment deadline. On Monday, things kind of pivoted a little bit. The Department of War suspended that deadline through a press release and the phases behind it, and gave a task force 60 days to decide what happens next. So we ended up kind of tearing this up and rebuilding this around one goal, which is to leave you knowing exactly what has changed, what hasn't changed, what to do about it. No panic, no pitch, no spin. And whether you're here from manufacturing, aerospace, logistics, automotive, or anywhere else in the defense supply chain, if your contracts are touching Department of War work, next half hour is going to be very important for you. Alrighty, so you notice a couple of folks have joined me today. I want to do some quick introductions. First off, Justin Shanken, he's our Chief Security Officer, former federal special agent, former counterintelligence lead at the agency that runs government security assessments. He's been busy kind of making a bunch of calls this week, including to the department itself. So when Justin mentions, hey, knowing what's happening behind the scenes, it's not a figure of speech. Welcome Sean Harris. He's our Chief Risk and Compliance Officer. Sean equally has spent a lot of time on the phone talking with lead assessors, C3PAOs, and clients that are actively midstream in this CMMC journey right now. Welcome Ben Kurtz. He's president of Kelly Klosure. Ben is going through this exact process right now as we speak, with real money down and a real assessment date on the calendar. So looking forward to hearing from him about some of the, how he has been responding and how his business is, what the next plans are. And then also want to welcome Matt Lewis. He's Chief Security Officer at Field Effect, and his team defends businesses exactly like yours every day. So let's get this started. Justin, you've made a bunch of calls this week, including folks to the department itself. Before we get into what it means for everybody's contracts and so forth, lay the landscape for us. Why is this happening? Because this didn't come out of nowhere.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I appreciate the handoff. So as everybody knows, and hopefully as everyone knows here by now, that we are here to discuss CMMC and the compliance requirements that go with that. But obviously we got that shakeup. So I just want to kind of say this, just to start out as a good opening to our webinar here, is that this suspension hit third-party certification mechanisms, not the underlying standard. So I just want to kind of lay the land there. And what I'm going to do is just talk very briefly on going from the top level of why we're doing CMMC within DoD down. So I'm a former counterintelligence special agent, did it for 22 years. And for the last 12 years of my tenure with the government, I had covered the Southeast for DoD contractors, but classified. In my case, it was classified DoD contractors. What had happened back then, just so you know, and to give you a little bit of insight, is we were dealing with espionage cases and a lot of cyber cases that were turning into loss of data, but also loss of programs and development and research funding and all the things that go with that. And that was detrimental. And the government was tired of it. And so it came out and basically said, you need to reimburse this program that we've spent billions of dollars on R&D on is gone. It's left to our adversaries. And the companies kind of came back and said, whoa, you can't get your money back. We're sorry that this happened. This eventually evolved into what is now CMMC. And so the companies and DoD contractors wanted to be able to say, hey, we did this framework, and if there was something that can happen, we can at least say we did the best that we could. But as we all know, in cyber warfare, it's very challenging. So now skipping ahead to where we are now and all the different iterations, I just want to remind everyone, CMMC has paused several times. And we have seen just several times. And we have seen an adjustment at each phase and each level. So please understand that this is just the same regimen we've seen up until this point. So, looking through my notes here, I just want to say that the other thing that kind of the last comment I'll say on this, because I try to speak from a threat perspective, cyber threat in DoD contractors, frankly, anywhere, but especially DoD contractors, is so high. And I know we were kind of having this dialogue a little bit earlier, but I know we want to talk about the compliance, the CMMC, and we get in there and how this and C3PAOs and all these different things with it. But going through this anyway is going to save you and make you more secure. And being wrapped up in ransomware or cyber bad actor or hack or all the different things we can discuss another time is so costly that don't pause on this, is what I'm trying to say. And it's time to move forward, as well as it's not going away anywhere. And in my personal opinion, I like to look at the geopolitical because of my background and being an ex-warfighter myself. We are in a conflict with Iran, and we are missing missiles. We have a depletion in weapon systems. So having a pause right now while we're trying to catch those things up, all of this geopolitical is kind of playing into this. But if you think it's going away, frankly, it's just not. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, Justin. So, Sean, let's transition over to you. So, bringing this down to a ground level, the announcement came out on Monday. Just for the folks here, let's just level set. So, what happened? What are the changes, and where are we at? Just what's the big picture? What's the big picture here?
Yeah. We just got the larger view. Let me bring it down to your desk. As policy announcements don't handle CUI, people do. That's what we're doing every day, right? So I think the micro version in one sentence is the department removed the person who was going to check your work, basically. Didn't remove the work itself and did not remove the consequences. So the risk is not less at the moment. It could be greater if you weren't in a good position, but it moved essentially. So the milestone, the phase 2 milestone of having to have a C3PO or an outside party review your work by November 10th, that's when it was going to start going into contracts and be enforced, I should say, that has been suspended and moved. And so, how long is that going to be moved for? We're not sure. What is the next state of that? We're going to hopefully figure out something in the next 60 days or after the next 60 days, knowing, what we've seen in these past pauses that Justin pointed out is rarely actually 60 days, probably going to be a little longer than that. So we'll see exactly how that shakes out. I think, it's absolutely critical that, the 110 controls that are there, that's part of NIST 800-171, that is what level 2 requires. Those haven't gone away. And they even said in that declaration, right, in that agenda, that memo item, that those aren't going away. You're still subject to that. So keep that in mind as this comes out.
Great, thanks for that. So, sounds like the rules didn't change as much as the headlines might have suggested. Is that fair?
The referee left the game, but yeah, the rules are still the same. We're still playing the same game, and we don't know in what form the referee will come back. Yeah.
Right. So, Ben, you're around Monday. You get this announcement. You hear about it. You've invested real money for your business. You've got an assessment date, invested. Take us into that moment. Like, what went through your head? How did you respond? And how have you guys, since you've gained more information about what's going on, where are you at with the business right now?
Yeah, one of the things that when I read the announcement on Monday evening that popped in my head as I'm looking at it, one of the reasons that they threw in there was that they were going to potentially lose a chunk of their defense industrial base, right? That a good chunk of contractors were not going to be compliant with this in time to be able to continue to provide their services to the government with the rule in place as it is, right? Being one of the companies that's been working hard to make sure that we get our assessment completed in time for that, I'm kind of like, well, wait a minute, what about us, right? That was kind of the first thing that happened. I'm like, well, what about us? Then I realized the government really doesn't care enough about each individual company, and they're more worried about the overall base, right? And so Monday morning, I called, talked to Sean for a little bit, let him know what we've decided to do in a real short period of time was, as part of this whole progression that we've been making towards having a what I like to call an easily defensible position with regard to the standard for an assessment, we're going to go ahead and finish making the adjustments to our program so that we are in that position. That was the first thing that I wanted to do, was make sure, okay, hey, look, let's not stop any of the adjustments or any of the changes we're making to make this a better situation for us, right? Um, the secondary part of that at this point becomes what goes on with the assessment. Well, what we've signed up for with our C3PAO that we've engaged was to do a mock audit and then the final audit after that. We're still in the process of determining whether or not we want to continue to the mock audit level or what we're going to do there. I mean, it's only been 3 days, so and it sounds like we got a little bit of time here. Uh, it's just kind of fun being stuck in the middle, right? Like you've got everybody on the outside of this saying, "Hey, you got to go ahead, go ahead, go ahead." But then on the other hand, you've got your monetary considerations to make and things like that. But like Justin said, if you have a breach of any kind, it doesn't matter what it's related to. It could just be somebody clicked on a phishing email and it's not related to anything defense, but now you got ransomware. Nobody wants that. Um, and one of the good things that come out of doing all of this, uh, the standards are still in place. Sean said the referee left the game, but I'm not sure that's entirely true. I think the referee's only coming out when there's a foul, right? So if they see something go on, you still could be subjected to an audit, to False Claims Act, to those kinds of things too. Those are all part of doing business with the government anyway. There's a lot of other regulations and things that we have to comply with when we're doing work with the federal government, and those same rules apply across the board, whether it's you're just general contract compliance or it's doing things like adhering to this standard. So anything you can do, I think to preserve the progress that you've made so far through the program. If you're in the middle like we are, uh, my suggestion would be to do what you can to make sure that you got your value out of what you've done to this point, and then evaluate how far you have left to go. And you're going to have to figure out, how that fits best with your company, is where to break that off, um, or whether to break it off at all, right? But I think, we're going to learn a lot in 60 days. I agree. I don't think there's going to be a standard, right? The standard I think the standard's still going to be the same. Um, how they are going to come back for the verification portion of that sounds like it may change, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So Ben, I think you've said something that's kind of worth underlining, that the requirement wasn't really the only reason to do the work, right? Is that fair?
Right. Yeah, and I can tell you, as we've gone through this, our team here is incredibly cybersecurity conscious, right? They just are. It's from all the annual trainings that we do and the micro trainings that we have coming out once a week, and that just all the conversations that we have internally about how to handle this or that. It's hearing about, some company across town, our colleagues or whatever in town here that have had a breach, and everybody talks about that kind of stuff. Our hygiene's even gotten better amongst ourselves for our personal lives at home through all of this, because you learn all these things you should be or shouldn't be doing, whether that's using a password manager or using multi-factor authentication. That's become a lot more prevalent, and those kinds of things are still very important. So, take as much credit as you can for what you're doing, because it's not just a compliance effort, it's also a security effort.
Yeah, no, great points there, Ben. Matt, so let's bring you into the conversation. So your team defends, businesses like the ones watching right now every day. Did anything change for you on the threat picture on July 13th? What's your view on where things are at?
Yeah, absolutely nothing changed as far as the threat picture goes. I mean, we're seeing increased use of artificial intelligence, which is having two impacts. It's lowering the bar to entry for cybercrime. It's also increasing the speed of attacks. And so all all organizations of any size are under increasing cyber pressure. And then you've got the defense industrial base, which has to deal with all the regular stuff that every industry does: ransomware, spear phishing emails, that type of thing. And then depending on the sensitivity of the information that they also have state-sponsored actors, the Russias, the Chinas of the world, that might be looking to steal that data, right? So it's never been more important for them to take cybersecurity seriously. And I think it's important. I think Ben touched on it, but CMMC wasn't just created to stop nation state actors from stealing the intellectual property of the defense industrial base. The Department of War wants a resilient supply chain, and having key suppliers offline for weeks or months dealing with the ransomware incident is not ideal.
For sure. So I get a question for the group. So how many contracts are out there that still need to be assessed? How many C3 PAOs do we have out there? Can someone kind of address that?
So the math that Kirsten Davies put into that memo, right, that came out on Monday, was 100 C3 PAOs. Now, some of that's and there's 100,000 defense industrial base DIB contractors, right? And so there's different people in different parts of that math. So, we're not fully sure. There's a gentleman from one of the bigger firms that does this, that he has a whole tracking that he does on a spreadsheet that shows the total number of C3 PAOs and what is 50% of their capacity, and they hadn't even met that capacity yet. So I think the bigger thing is the general organizations seeking certification, the OSCs out there that were getting the certification. Not a lot of them were signing up, and maybe it was going to be more coming in the crunched months, right? And that math wouldn't have worked. And so, yeah, there's still a lot to be done. And if you're just starting now, if you just started recently or just starting now, or you hadn't started yet, that was going to be a real pain. So this is a boon to have this bit of delay, but surely get started because you were far behind to begin with.
So just for clarity for the folks here, so what are we still legally required to do today? And did any legal exposure actually go down?
So, I mean, everything that predates CMMC remains in force. So really, arguably, the exposure has gone up a little bit because a lot of people were going to be tested and it was going to be vetted prior to going live and enforced in the CMMC section of it. But you got DFARS 252-204-712 that requires and has the NIST SB 800-171 revision 2. So that's all still fully enforced and applied. All 110 controls. You still have to have your plan of action and milestones, your POAM, your system security plan. You're going to have to still put in your SPURS score, your SPRS scoring, and you have your annual affirmations under 70-19 and 70-20. You still have to have your 72-hour incident reporting. So under DIBMET. So that's something that if you don't have an incident response plan and you don't have a plan around that, you're surely not going to meet that. So really, I mean, everything that was there prior is there now, except you don't have to have that assessment by November 10th. And essentially now that date's going to move. We don't know till when or in what form.
Okay. Justin, you want to chime in?
Yeah, a couple things I'd like to say. One, I think it's kind of come up in the questions of like, do we have enough? We've been using this analogy with referees. I think it's sort of clever. I do think that there's not enough referees, at least right now, for either because, like Sean had mentioned, that everyone's holding out, but the math does not hold up for this to be done in November. That's just for the audit piece of it. But I want to make one comment, and this goes back to what Ben said about, hey, the referee comes out when there's a foul. The number one way to guarantee you get audited from a foul is get ransomware, because you are going to have to report that. You're going to report that incident, and it is going to trigger the audit at that point. So having good cyber hygiene up until this point, let alone following this, is so hyper important because, like Matt said earlier with the AI threat, it used to be this concept, and I heard it over and over again in different investigations. Oh, we thought we were under the radar. We thought this. Where we would rely, when we would look at the Chinas and the Russias and these bad actors and floor after floor people that are hacking us, they're not kids with a hoodie. This is a business. And now when you add the layer of AI on it, it's finding everyone. There is no longer this case of, are these people, is it connected with this? It is finding it in mass and bringing those opportunities back to those groups. So it is hyper important that our cyber hygiene is up to snuff, or you are cruising for a bruising. You're going to get audited, and then it's all going to trickle downhill from there.
All righty. A couple questions have come in, so I'm going to just kind of pivot over to some of these. First one, and feel free to chime in, whoever wants to take this. And we've already scheduled the C3 PAO assessment. Did we waste the money? Who wants to take that one?
I just actually just talked to a client that was asking that. And we talked to some C3POs and the town hall for the cyber AB. They went over that too. So they confirmed that all program elements remain operational, including the voluntary and the regular C3PAO assessments. They can still issue the certifications. So all that stuff's still happening. Did you waste your money if you already had it? I think the things we just talked about, right? If you get breached or you have ransomware, or at this point, if there's a false claims act, so you could have a whistleblower internally that says, hey, they knew they weren't meeting it. They knew your organization wasn't meeting the requirements. And when this came off, you decided to pump the brakes, but you were still taking those contracts from the government saying you were meeting it. Well, if you have that assessment, that is probably the best insurance you can have to defend against that. That is the best way to say, hey, we had a third party, an outside organization come in and take a look. So you can sleep well at night if you had that done. And that's why what Ben was saying too, if you a lot of people already have money that they've paid towards it, they have, things and dates starting. Well, I'd say keep those if you can. Maybe you push them out a bit if you need more time. Maybe you can prioritize making sure controls work over collecting evidence and push it out a bit. But I think the best defense here is to get those third-party assessments.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
I want to add on to that. Whoever out there has already got your assessment done, market it.
Yeah.
When you are going after DoD contracts, market it. Turn it into a way to make more money, because you have to have level 2. And if you say you're already ahead of it and we've paid for this, make money on that. It will work, because they're giving out contracts. You have to be level 2 already. You have to have that. And if you say, not only are we, when you're, bidding on whatever thing that you're working on, RFP, RFQ, you can say we've already been assessed and been approved, and it's going to put you, and if anything, it's an unfair advantage because people can't really get it right now, or maybe not. It will put you above the rest. I would market it highly. I think it's an increased benefit and not a waste of funds.
Yeah, good points there. So let's talk through, I know folks are in different stages. Some are in, like Ben, some are just about to start. So let's kind of talk through these various scenarios and see, kind of based on where you're at, what should the recommendations be. So if anybody wants to kind of, maybe Sean, me want to start here. We got some couple scenarios that folks may be in. Let's talk through it a little bit, and let's provide a little guidance.
Sure. I mean, Justin just touched on that first one. Already certified. I love what he said there. Yeah, I mean, it's in an uncertain world, you're a more certain sub and you're a more certain contractor, right? And I think we all can agree that they're unlikely to come out with something that is a higher bar than it is now. So you've probably already met something that will be grandfathered in. We don't know, of course, but I would imagine that it's gonna count for something, and it does count for something today. If you have a C3PAO date booked, I think you need to look inward of where you are in relation to that. And if you are someone who you are rushing kind of breakneck speed to get there, and maybe you could spend a little more time on making those controls are correct, or maybe you can test a few of the options, technologies maybe that were put in place to meet those gaps. Now's the time that you can do that. Like I wouldn't take your foot off the gas, but I would definitely maybe shift what you're doing. And that's the same thing with your mid-build or remediating. That's the same thing. So we're telling people, hey, we need to, we're talking to, and Ben, I think it was Tuesday morning when we talked, right after the Monday that we had the announcement. And I was, as someone who works with a lot of organizations that are in the middle of this, I was not sure what people would say, right? Like I wasn't sure. So hearing Ben say that was great, because he understood the value of what we were doing and the commitment that he's made when he takes these contracts, right? And so I think, interestingly, I've had a dozen or so other conversations like that since then, and they've all been very similar. So I do think that people really get this, and maybe I have a biased group of people because they're the ones that actually reached out and were doing it to begin with, right? Maybe there's a whole bunch of people out there that are of a different mindset. But I think if you're mid-build remediating, you certainly should continue to do that. You may want to, maybe there's less pressure now to get that date booked with the C3PAO. And you may want to wait until the next step there. I don't mean to take all these. I think you open it to everybody, but I'll go through the rest and then we can comment on it. Not started or score looks optimistic. same thing. We get a lot of people that come in, and this is kind of some of our original conversation, Rob, that before we pivoted, right? A lot of people that come in that have a score, and it's kind of like when people do their insurance attestation or anything like that, and they believe that they're at this score, but they don't fully understand. And it's this 800-171 is a large document, right? It's a huge thing. And so if you're not sure what you're supposed to do and you're meeting contracts for it, you hire a lawyer, right? You hire experts to look at it and make sure that you're meeting those requirements that you're committing to. And so if you haven't started, but your score looks optimistic, well, then you probably are at the point where you need to bring in an expert or someone that's helpful to look at that and to see where you are and give you a reality check on your score. And a lot of times we'll get people that come in that are above 100 on their score. 110 is perfect. And they're quite a bit lower once we rescore them. And we're looking at it through a not rose-colored glasses, right? We're making sure that you'll meet these requirements. And then the primes and flow downs. I don't think there's any pause on flow downs happening now. There are essentially what's happening is you're going to have a level 2 self-assessment now. And so what that means is that there's all the requirements are still there. You're just not having that outside assessment. So you're still going to need to meet these requirements. So I think in that case, you can always check with them. I know there's a few things that required the C3PAO assessment, and that was in the contracts, and then that was getting flowed down. And part of that announcement was that they're going to have them scrub that or change that. So.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
I want to say one other thing that hasn't happened yet, but I can see happening very soon is the primes. The bigger primes out there are I just want to talk about one potential scenario. Let's say the audit, the C3 PAO concept goes away. The audit concept goes away. There's a lot of pressure to the primes, the bigger players in this space, that I can very much see that they're going to establish these rules and regulations and have some type of audit function on top of that if you're working with them. So I would be prepared for that posturing. Obviously, it hasn't been long enough for them to really comment yet, and they're waiting to see what comes out as well. But I've worked directly with all of these major primes for years and seen their culture and posture to these types of things. And because they've survived many of these for 80 years, these companies have been around 100 plus years. I could see it from that. If you're working with a prime, be prepared that you're still going to have to do the same things, or they're going to have something look at it, or you're going to have to prove it in some capability.
Yeah, good points there. So maybe we can let's talk about what does the next 6 days look like, and if you're kind of figuring out what you're going to do here, what should be some guidelines. We can move on to what people should be thinking about. Sean, maybe you want to kind of run through these, and anybody else can feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what was released, right? What we know from this announcement is that if you go through this, there's a task force assigned over that 60 days. And so we're going to get something back. RFI, right? Where hey, you can actually comment. You can go in and comment and put in, your feelings about this as part of the industry in any form. And so that's what they're opening back up, is a conversation. You definitely need to, like what Justin was just saying, I think everybody wants to remove uncertainty in an uncertain time. So you need to be aware of your contracts, your primes, your flow downs, those kind of things, and look for any kind of modifications or changes. And then I think, essentially you should not, if you have determined, or if you know that you are not meeting those 110 controls, which a lot of people found out through this journey, to give some credit to this process, right? Then you need to keep working on that. And so even during this stop doesn't, like, I love that question for Matt. That was a great one, Rob. Did anything change in the world of criminal activity online? No, nothing changed. They are attacking. If anything, this is, blood in the water of a bunch of people stopping to doing things to stop them, so certainly you need to keep putting the pedal down and keep working on getting your controls enforced and get the gaps that you have closed. Get your POAM worked.
Yeah.
All right.
Rob, I think
Go
one
ahead.
thing to remember too over this next 60 days, if you're like us and you're engaged with companies to work on this stuff, you know, you've got relationships with these guys. They're part of your team. Um, don't stop talking to them just because we've got this pause going on, right? Stay in communication with these guys. It's important if you've got contracts that are open, even if we have to pause for a minute here to see what's going to be there when the smoke clears. Don't stop talking to these guys because otherwise you could miss out on some information that comes available. You can get some insights from these folks and keep those relationships open for sure.
Yeah. Hey, Matt. So, what should executives be thinking about right now?
Oh man, there's a lot for executives to be thinking about when it comes to this. It's what are my risks? Where am I at with CMMC implementation? What are the risks of moving forward? What are the risks of not moving forward? You know, there's three basic choices here. You plow ahead, you pause and see where it's going, or you just use this as a opportunity to delay. And I think every business owner is going to be looking at this situationally based on a lot of different factors. How close am I to implementing the 110 controls? How many contracts do I actually have with DOW? What's it worth to me, right? As Justin was saying, how can I use this certification if I do go forward? I think the biggest risk for business owners, if they don't go through with the certification, is that they're going to be left in sort of like a gray area where I think I'm meeting all the 110 controls, but do you really want to wait until DIBCAC shows up to do a full audit to figure that out? I don't know. It's a very complicated situation, and I just don't know what to say about it. I was pretty shocked on Monday.
Yeah, that was definitely big news. All right. So let's talk through clients or companies out there that want to ask questions. What are next steps? How can they get a hold of us? Let's set up some conversations. Maybe Sean, you can talk through this a little bit. What are next steps for folks that are interested in the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, you got a little breathing room now, so now's the time to figure out where you stand. So, does your score match reality? Even if you don't end up needing a C3PO, you probably should bring in someone to take a look. And so what you can do is you can scan this QR code here or send an email to secure@itsasap.com. And essentially we'll have a free 25-minute compliance consultation that we're going to extend to everybody that's attended this. And through that, we go through discussion and we've had a lot of these discussions. I personally have had a lot of these discussions in my team. And so we can very quickly kind of figure out where you are in relation to where you need to be and help kind of lay out some options for you. And those options don't always include us, right? Those are just, hey, we'll give you the best advice we can give regardless of if we're the ones to help you or not. But ultimately, we can have that conversation.
All right, great points there. So we'll go ahead and add a link in the chat for folks to go ahead and get that meeting scheduled. Be questions. I'm going to go around the room here for kind of just a one-line key takeaway. If the audience is going to remember one thing from the conversation today, what would you want it to be? Who would like to go first?
I'll go ahead and address this. Yeah, sure. I would think keep moving forward. Don't trust your own score. I mean, we've just seen this over and over again where the scoring system is a little funky anyway, but the people that are doing their self-attestation, basically they're self-scoring, it's just not coming up. Keep in mind that this isn't about compliance, it's about cyber threat. We are the real reason why we started all of this is to prevent, and if you're working in the DoD or DOW now, you are there to protect the warfighter. That's it. Keep in mind what the mission is. We're there to protect the warfighter, protect the warfighter. I know what it's like to be the warfighter. I really like it. And everyone I worked with for my years with on the classified contract side took that extraordinarily seriously. So I really don't see much changing and posturing. And if you haven't started, now would probably be a good time to start. So we've seen that. We've seen that quite a bit. And that's That's not bad. It's just time to get going.
Maybe Matt, you want to chime in? What would be your key takeaway?
Yeah, I'll keep it short. There's been many twists and turns in the CMMC road, and I would expect many more in the next 6 months.
Ben, how about you?
Right.
What's the key takeaway for businesses like yourselves? What would you?
Yeah, I
recommend?
think the key takeaway from all of this is that, and I think it's the common thread we've had so far, is that even though the assessment requirement is looks like it's going to change, the underlying security requirement isn't changing. That it's still there. And to reiterate another point that's been made, if you're self-assessing, you probably, like we were, you're not as close as you thought you were. Once you start digging into these things and you look at what it takes to be compliant, some of the solutions you have in place that you think meet the requirement for this get you to maybe what Sean would call in our review a yes partially, right? Like you're kind of doing it, but it doesn't quite get where you need to be totally secure and totally compliant with the requirement that's in the standard. So I think it's important to go through that review with, as a small company, I don't have IT guys, that's me. Right. So, it's important to go through with somebody that knows what they're doing and knows what the acceptable methods are to take care of those things and get those in place.
Great. Thanks so much, Ben. Sean, what about you? Key takeaway for today?
I would just say, pause, take a breath. Kitty Arrington put a thing up on LinkedIn that summarized it well. Hey, this has happened every time CIOs come in. There's been a pause.
Maybe can you touch a little bit who's Carrie Arrington for those that maybe don't know?
So that's the original CIO that was brought in that basically stood up this program. So since then, there's been several others, and then she was brought back at a certain point, and so it's just I think she kind of stated, hey, she's watched it since she helped create it, and people like or don't like her. That's a whole another thing, right? Of politics and what you like or don't like. But ultimately, she did say, which is a truthful fact, it has paused every time, and then it restarted again. So the point I would say is, I see in a lot of conversations online right now, a lot of extremes either way, probably going to be somewhere down the middle, hopefully, right at the end of it. And we may end up with a better system here, but it's not going to go away. So definitely take a breath, treat it as a gift of being able to work on this stuff more before you have to go to that assessment if you haven't done it already. Or if you did it already, hey, you're done. Good for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we got a bunch of questions, so I'm going to transition over to that. And then I'll go ahead and mention the question. And then if you want to just kind of raise your hand, take it first, and then we'll go ahead and do it that way, maybe just for simplicity. In your experience, what assumptions have turned out to be wrong? Maybe Ben, maybe you want to take that one. Is there anything that when you started your journey, what surprised you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just touched on that a minute ago. That concept that, hey, we went through the standard and went through all of these things with our managed service provider before this process all started, to kind of see where we sat through this and started plugging some of those holes. So we thought at the time the biggest misconception that you have is that you're closer than you think, right? You're not as close as you think in most cases with a lot of these things. Like for example, there could be a piece of software you're using that's providing a security benefit for you, but it's not FedRAMP compliant, or it's not, services that you're using that don't meet the standard. And you've got to look at all of these different facets, and it's complex, and there's a lot to it, and you don't end up being as close as you thought you were.
Yep. Another question came in. What are the biggest misconceptions organizations still have, and what has caused the biggest delays? I'd like to take that one.
I think that seems similar to in your experience, what assumptions turned out to be wrong, right? It seems similar to that in the sense that a lot of organizations, and maybe it's because they're getting hit with LinkedIn ads or ads on whatever social media, hey, CMMC in 60 days or something like that, right? They think they're going to write a check, bring on a tool, and solve the problem. And really, it's less around the technology. And a lot of the technology can be fairly complicated depending upon where you are. But it's really about process and workflow and And scoping too. Scoping's a big one that just making sure that you have that scoped correctly and exactly where that data is going to live and how it's going to flow through your organization. And so assumptions around that are the biggest ones that I see, where they think, hey, I can wait because I'm going to just sign this check over here and we'll get it done. It doesn't work. It takes time.
Okay. Another one came in. Should we pause our compliance budget, enclave build, or remediation roadmap?
I feel like we kind of answered that one. I would say that, you Matt kind of answered that a little bit of I think you should not be pausing anything related to that if you have any contracts in which you have committed to meeting these requirements, right? Which were already there prior to CMMC and having the assessment, right? And so you should not be pausing that. Might you pause the C3PO assessment? I think you need to look at contracts and understand what you have there, what your options are. And then there's pros or cons that we talked about before, right? And you certainly should go and reach out to them. I think, a survived version of this will probably still include them, of course. And so, like Ben said, you need to keep that relationship going and you want to keep the communication.
I think regardless of CMMC, having your most sensitive data in a secure enclave is a very good idea, just from a basic cybersecurity standpoint.
Yeah, no, definitely makes sense. Another question. So how and when does the math work? 100 assessors versus 100,000 companies in need.
Yeah, I mean, that number's been thrown out a lot, right? 100 C3PAOs, but about 900 assessment teams. Just to keep that analogy going, I don't think it was a lack of referees. It was a lack of people in the game. That's really what it was. It's that small defense industrial based companies were struggling with implementing 800 171.
Yeah. Justin, you had your hand there.
Or yeah, I think the DIB inside the DIB, there's going to be a lot of problems with folks that are dragging their feet. We've seen this in lobbying and, et cetera, which obviously makes those numbers, everybody waiting until the last minute. But I also think that they're looking at this as a management of like, how do we manage this with AI and the new things that are coming out with AI? You may see an AI variant that's going to do this. I'm just kind of theoretically speaking here, but we're seeing this across every vertical. So I could see DOW coming up with something there, or making it where it's not so man-to-man heavy for these audits. And that could be good or bad. I'm not saying. I'm just saying I can see automation.
Mm-hmm. All right. Another question. What does an engagement look like with a partner on this? Maybe Sean, you want to take that one?
Sure.
Yeah. And then one follow-up on it is like, how long is the road?
Right. So this is the question we got quite a bit for the last several years, right? How long is it going to take and what's it going to cost? The general answer I give that nobody likes is that it depends on where you're starting. So, we have to make your house a certain type of house that is secure. And I don't know what you're living in now. So part of that is discovery and scoping. Now, if you do end up going with an enclave and that makes sense, then that can actually speed things up. And that's what a lot of people were doing prior because of the short timeline that they had left if they jumped in the game so late. It's a greenfield environment that we can set up and we don't have to retrofit everything that you have. But generally speaking, you're looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 months if you're pushing it hard. And the engagement, essentially, we come in, we scope your people, processes, assets, everything in there. We come with, okay, what is the environmental build? Is that going to be an enclave, or is it hybrid, or is it your whole environment? What are we going to do there? And then we do a gap assessment for NIST 800-171. So from there, we're going to have a plan of action that comes out of it, and we're going to start digging against that. And there are some good tools, like Justin said, that have already been developed just in this phase as people rush to get this done. And I'm sure there'll be even more. And so there are ways to speed that up with AI and different things, but it still requires a lot of human just kind of going through every piece. If you don't have your policies, we got to create those policies. It's not just about the maturity part of CMMC. It's not just about, do you have the policy? You got to show evidence that you're using the policies, that everybody understands them. Do you have the control? Yes, but is there evidence that the controls are enforced? And are you notified, and does someone act on it if they don't work properly? And so these are things, that's that yes partial that Ben said earlier, that you might be able to answer that kind of, but not completely. So.
Cool. Thanks for that, Sean. Any other kind of final thoughts on it, Justin? I think you have one.
Yeah, I want to remind everyone what CMMC stands for. It's Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. The only way to demonstrate maturity is not by turning it on the day before, trying to get it. That was never the intent. So they may change the acronym, but as of today, it stands for, the M is for maturity, or one of the M's. And that needs to be like, you have to demonstrate to win these contracts maturity, not that we just got our audit last week, or we just got this, I mean, now that's even a plus, but just keep that in mind. So the more you take off the throttle and stop, the more you're not demonstrating maturity.
Great points there. So I think we're starting to kind of wrap this up here. I'm going to give it another 30 seconds or so if anybody else wants to chime in with any last questions. So while we're kind of waiting for that, I just want to kind of thank all of you for attending. And I want to especially thank our speakers for sharing their expertise today. It's been an enlightening conversation, and it's great to hear from all these different perspectives, because we're all coming at this from a different angle, and being able to kind of collate all of that into a unified conversation, I think is hopefully going to be impactful for folks out there. So give it another kind of 5-10 seconds. Any other last questions? I guess with that, thank you everybody for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll catch you on the next go around.
Thanks, everyone.
Appreciate it.